live yet. There we go. Hey,
There we go.
everybody. Happy Friday and welcome back to Business Salad, where we mix up all things business for you for free. Thanks for joining me as I'm on the road on my way back from Colonial Williamsburg.
That's right. I love it. My name is Katie Anderson. This is Steph Reyna. She is en route. So we have all the kids outside the car right now. It's super exciting, but we are super happy to have our guest today, commercial real estate broker. We are stoked to talk about real estate, all of those things, and Mercedes Taylor. So we are excited to jump into things with you. Mercedes, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
You're welcome. I'm really excited to be here. This is really nice. And as I was mentioning before we went live, hopefully things will be quiet around my house. We all know what it's like trying to work from home these days between, the random teenager coming down, wanting something and what's going on around us. So we'll see how this goes.
100%. Absolutely. Well, we are ready to jump in. So I'm excited. I think this is a great topic right now. I think with so much kind of going on out there in the world, people are thinking about these things. And I think it's a lot of questions are coming to mind. So I think this will be really exciting for everybody. So first of all, before we jump into a lot of those questions, industry stuff, let's start with you, Miss Mercedes. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. Tell us about your business. Let's just start with a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm with Coldwell Banker Commercial Elite. I do 100% commercial. I don't sell houses at all. And I've been in this industry for over 18 years. And my experience spans property management and facilities management, and now, brokerage for the past, 4+ years. And before coming into the brokerage side, I've been involved with, like over 150 leases directly. I managed 500,000 square feet of commercial space. We're talking, large commercial Class A buildings. And in working so many years on the facilities management and property management side, you get to understand things from both perspectives. You get to see what happens after leases are signed and where the points of contention might be, where the problems are. Let's see, back in the day, I was highly certified in my field. I have a professional certification in facilities management from George Mason. And then also, it's kind of like the equivalent of being a CPA. I was a CFM in facilities management. So, what that means is I also literally know buildings, inside and out, and, a lot of the functions of running a building, which is a kind of a different perspective that a lot of commercial agents don't have. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Well, I have to say, Mercedes, you don't look old enough to be doing this for 18 years, number one. And number two, you were in property management, especially commercial. You're such a saint, I have to say. It takes a saint's patience to do that. So bless you.
It is not easy. Yeah. I can't say I miss it. I don't miss that side of the fence now.
That does not surprise me in the least. So I have to ask then, have you always done commercial real estate? Did you start that way, or did you start in residential and then move over?
I always started in commercial real estate. And so I was pregnant with my now 4-year-old, and I decided I didn't want to continue running the rat race with facilities management or property management, being on call 24/7. And it's like the more you did your job right, the less you were appreciated, because they thought like they could just cut costs. They don't need you. This place is running itself just fine. And I really wanted to be there for my little one. And it was my husband that suggested that I do commercial real estate. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. It's too salesy and too transactional. But it made sense with the background that I had. I thought I would just do it initially and maybe get out of it. But I fell in love with it. I think, what we do, whatever kind of business we have, it is what we make it. And so I was determined to not have it be salesy or transactional, and to make it really customer focused and relationship based. And so, I went right into commercial real estate, and that was not easy. There's a reason why there's very few commercial agents versus residential agents, but I'm super glad that I did that.
Yeah, it's definitely the Wild West.
Right. I love that. Well, one of the things I think is also good for us is to just for our viewership and for everybody out there, when it comes to finding real estate agents for things like this. For you, what states are you licensed in? How does that work as far as licensing and where you're sort of doing business? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'm licensed in Virginia and I cover all of Northern Virginia, which is a huge territory. So
Yeah.
I feel like I wouldn't be doing a service to clients if I would be, at least at this time, also working in Maryland and DC. So I focus on Virginia. And then what I'm going to try to do in speaking is just kind of talk more in generalities with the understanding that we might have some viewers that are watching from outside of this area.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, that's great.
And for our viewership, if you do have general questions, feel free to put them in the comments. If it's something that's state specific, we will help redirect you to somebody who is licensed in your state so you can get those particular questions answered. But what I'd like to do now, Mercedes, is jump into a little bit of that shop talk. And I'd like to start with, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people making when they are buying or leasing a commercial property?
Okay. I would say, and I wrote some of this down, of points that I wanted to cover because this is so important to me, and I can go on forever with the stories that I have. I should probably write a book at some point because I've seen a lot of stuff that is not good in the industry and mistakes that have been made. So I would say the first thing would be approaching a sale or a lease without any real negotiating power. So you never want to sit down at the negotiating table without the ability to actually stand up and walk away. And so, how do you do that? Well, for one, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Some people do that. They fall in love with the space. And then, whether the landlord knows it or the seller knows it, I see behind the scenes how they're willing to agree to less than ideal terms because they put all their eggs in one basket. And then the other thing that I see along those lines where people lose their negotiating power is, let's say they're in an existing space and they have a lease. And a common thing that people have in the lease is the option to renew. And that option to stay in the space, there's often a timetable that's associated with that, where it might say that they have to give notice within 6 months of their lease expiration. Well, too many people wait until maybe the landlord reaches out to them very close to that 6-month time period, and they're not giving themselves enough time to properly go through the process to see what else is on the market and to negotiate, whether it be with their existing landlord to make sure that they feel comfortable that the deal that they're getting and what they have is still, the best deal, or with that new landlord. So what happens a lot of times with not allowing enough time is people just kind of get scared. They run out the clock and they renew their lease only to find out years later that they're priced so over market for the space that they have because they didn't take the time to do it properly. So that would be another big one. Another huge one that I see all the time, because I work with so many small businesses and startup businesses, is trying to do it on a shoestring budget. That really scares me, and it's something that I very much in my role try to keep from happening. If you really don't have enough reserves, going into a lease especially is not a good idea. On a number of levels, even though the landlord might let you do it, some aren't really screening as much as others. What people don't realize is even having an LLC set up, almost all leases, other than maybe if you're a Fortune 500 company, you're signing a personal guarantee, which means if things don't work out and you default on their lease, they are coming after you personally. They're coming after your assets, you and your family. You could lose your home, your savings, all kinds of stuff. So if you don't have the money, don't do it. Maybe wait a little bit. There's ways of getting additional funding, everything from finding a partner in the business, investors, conventional commercial loans, SBA loans. But the one thing I'll tell you is the time to get the money is right up front, because let's say you open up your space, whether you purchase or lease it, and you don't have the extra funds available. if that downward spiral starts to happen, we'll use COVID as an example. All of a sudden they're shut down and, oh shoot, I don't have enough reserves. When you're at that point where you don't have money and your business is not doing well, who's going to lend you money?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Those
so
would
now
be.
I just have a quick question related to that. What, without obviously giving a specific number because it's going to be different for each client, what is a good percentage perhaps of reserve that you would recommend that your clients have before entering into something like that?
I mean, if I was just shooting from the hip, obviously the more the merrier, the safer. But if I was just shooting from the hip, I mean, I would really want to have at least 6 months in reserve. And what we saw with this pandemic, with the shutdowns and whatnot, we saw businesses that were going out of business within a matter of months because clearly they could not weather the storm even for a few months.
Right. Okay, perfect. So 6 months out there, everybody.
Yeah, again,
Absolutely.
the more merrier.
Yeah, definitely. Mercedes, I'm so glad that you mentioned some of that. I think sometimes we don't realize, what can happen. And if there are things sometimes outside of our control, like COVID, and, you'd appreciate this. I was in a situation ourselves where we went before COVID of having, 40 agents in the office, every office rented, COVID hits, everything out. Our building as a whole, people were just leaving. Like you said, individual LLCs were leaving. I mean, trouble all over the place. And in our situation, we've really had to say, we went from every office in our own office being kind of rented with us to changing. And you really have to say as a business owner, how are you going to make this work? What are you going to do? And that's a tough position to be in. And so I think, that leads me to really what our next question is, which is, it's so important to have someone that understands commercial real estate and understands both sides of it, from the leasee to the buying. What would you say that someone should think about or look for when they're kind of talking to real estate agents or leasing agents? What should they look for in these people? What would be kind of your recommendations on that to try find a good commercial real estate agent?
That's a great question. So the one thing that I see is a common mistake is somebody has a residential real estate agent that they love. We'll call her Sally. Sally helped to buy or help them buy or sell a house. And they go to Sally saying, I need to lease a retail space now. And the unfortunate thing that I see is Sally, knowing darn well you may or may not have ever done a deal like this before, very few, will take on that client. And it scares the living heck out of me, on a number of levels, because I can tell you 18 years in and gosh, like 250 leases later, I still continue to learn. That entire lease document is negotiable, and you don't know what you don't know. There's some serious landmines that are in there. Not to mention, there's the experience, but also the tools, because residential real estate agents, they use MLS for their listings and to search and whatnot. We, at least in the DC metro area and many other places around the country, we use CoStar. And depending on the kind of features you have and the deal your brokerage might have and whatnot, you could be looking at upwards of $500 a month to use that system, which if you're mostly doing residential, you and your broker are not going to feel it makes sense to sign on for that kind of service. And so what I see is residential agents approaching commercial deals, trying to do it through MLS, which means they don't have the analytics that they have. They're not able to see everything that we're able to see in terms of, listings. They don't have the comps. And if they're taking on a listing, they literally are not marketing it to people like me. Like I don't go in MLS. Like I said, I do zero residential. So I would likely never see their listing, and they're missing out on a huge part of the market. So that's a big one. And then commercial's so broad. There's so many different asset types. And so, there's office and retail, industrial, flex, multi-family, land. And you could be a generalist, but there comes a point when, you kind of have to narrow down that scope a little bit to be good at what you do, even as a commercial agent. So you want to find out, even with a commercial agent that's experienced, they could have 10 years of experience, but if they've never done a land deal and you're asking them to do a land deal, that's probably not a good idea. So you want to find out also what their specialties are.
Absolutely. That's great. That's really good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a residential agent myself, I'm definitely going to say to my other residential agents out there, just don't. If you have a commercial deal or a commercial lease or whatever it is land in your lap, please find a reputable commercial agent that you trust to handle the deal. Please.
Let me tell you something. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I got to tell you a story. So, it was a residential agent that confided to me that she did a commercial deal. It was some kind of lease. It was either retail or office. She told me the story a while back. She waits until the deal is totally done to have the discussion on what her commission is, which, first off, that's a big no-no. The thing that stinks in commercial real estate is, unlike residential, where in the MLS it says you get whatever percent, we've got to negotiate on every single deal and get an actual commission agreement signed, with the other party. She goes through the whole deal. And then they have the discussion about commission. They ask her what she wants, and she told them what residential agents get, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's like, what is it, the half of the first month's rent. Now, they, of course, gladly gave that to her because she did not know that for commercial real estate, when you're an agent, you are actually, like your commission is based on the entire lease value. And so when when the broker found out what she did, I mean, I guess they really let her have it and everything. And that's terrible for her that she didn't know how to negotiate for herself. But what I think about is this person that didn't know how to negotiate for themselves just put somebody into a space with maybe a 5-year lease with God knows what kind of bogeys in there that are going to explode on this small business. And that's the part that really scares me. So I've seen this play out, and believe me, we know you. When you're a residential agent and you come to us and you're asking questions, we know very quickly whether or not this is your first rodeo and it's not a good thing for your client.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
That was a mistake. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Agents out there, residential agents, if you're not interested in protecting your client, please protect your client. Protect your paycheck. How's that sound? If one doesn't motivate you, maybe the other will.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you talked about protecting your clients too, because that with our licenses, I technically could sell houses. You technically could do commercial. And I don't know if I agree with that or not, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. We also have a fiduciary responsibility to do right by our client and give them the best representation possible. And that would be impossible if you've never negotiated a lease before. And Sally is going to help her client find a retail space. How do you reconcile that? How do you, that's wrong to me ethically.
Yes. Absolutely. It absolutely is. I love that you're so ethical, Mercedes. That's why.
Thank you. And I've never sold a house. I've never, even with my own home, because I practice what I preach and I believe so much in specialization, even though I could, and even though I could have saved, a ton of money by, by trying to market my own house and everything, because I have such a respect for what residential agents do on their side. I don't want anyone to see a single residential deal in MLS for my name, because I really think it's important for us to stay in our own lane.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I love that. And now I know, and we understand that every client is different. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your expertise, because I know we've got a lot of people out there that were asking for this specific information when we started promoting. So what should a commercial buyer look for in a retail space that's relative to their business? So for example, how do they figure out what they need as far as frontage and access? How do they calculate, space and size that they might need, things like that?
Right. That's another good question. So of course it's so hard to just give a blanket answer because, as you mentioned, every business is unique, but for starters, location, we all talk about that. You obviously pay a premium if you are going to be in an area where you're in like a big shopping center with large anchors, or you're along a road where there's like 50,000 cars going by and you've got incredible visibility. That's going to come at a much higher rental rate than if you're, off of Timbuktu Road. But even though you're retail, it doesn't mean that you necessarily need that for your business. I've worked with businesses where it actually is not something that they need at all. They're booked out for some time on their services or whatnot, and it would actually be disruptive for them to have walk-in traffic. The shopping centers have such long, restrictive, scary leases, quite frankly, that if you don't have to do that and have all the gotchas of things like percentage rent and whatnot, if you could avoid it, do that. But if you need it, you need it. You don't want to be a penny wise, pound foolish. I've noticed in working with clients, whether it be office or retail, most people can't think in terms of square footage. So it's very hard for them when I ask them what kind of square footage that you need for them to say, oh, I need it to be between 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. But when they start to talk about what they need and they start to give me that list, or they give me an example of a similar business, hey, something about the size of a typical Subway because we have a model where it's mostly carry out or whatnot, that's a good starting point. Another reason to work with a commercial agent is because, if you tell us what your vision is, because we do so much of this stuff, we can kind of tell for you what you need. And then another tool that's available is test fits, and that's done, oftentimes in office, sometimes done in retail. But before taking on that space, literally making sure that everything can fit in there the way that it's supposed to. That's something that you can do. And along the lines of office space, I will say that 1,000 square feet in one building could be very different than 1,000 square feet in another building. And a lot of people don't realize that because it's rentable square feet and not usable square footage. And there's a load factor that's built in because somebody has to pay for all these common areas and fancy lobby areas and in bathrooms and whatever. So that's another thing to watch out for is also to be able to compare apples to apples. But that's where we can help them and make their lives a little bit easier, because it's pretty, it can be pretty daunting. Demographics is also very important when you're considering a retail location. If you're thinking about having a high-end hair salon or restaurant, obviously you don't want to do that in the lower income area. We would want to focus in on what the average household income looks like and what your typical clients would look like to make sure that we put you in the right space, as well as the amount of population. Again, if you're in Timbuktu, you could have everyone that's your customer, but if it's only 10 people, that's not gonna help you. You're not gonna hit your numbers. You're not gonna sell enough widgets with 10 people in Timbuktu.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's really good too, from that angle of the side saying, okay, if you're looking for that and you're what to be aware of and what pitfalls to sort of avoid, what about on the other side of it? Let's say it's the person who owns the property or who's looking to lease the property or whatever the case is. What advice would you have to someone who's considering selling or leasing, maybe even subleasing their commercial space? What kind of advice do you have for the person on the seller, leaser side of things?
I will say this sounds self-serving, but I really, obviously with the work that I do, I feel there's an incredible amount of value in having a commercial real estate agent help you. We have the tools available. We know how to properly market, where to market. And so, they say 100% of nothing is still nothing. Sure, you could save a few bucks, but I've talked to landlords that have thought about, whether or not they were going to use me and arguing over what the percentage is going to be. And then a year later, I'm still seeing their space is still out there and not leased. And I'm like, well, I know that would have been done already. But that would be one thing. And then really thinking about who their prospective buyer or their tenant would be. Even in the middle of a pandemic, I could put people in, 3,000 square feet of space and less, day in and day out. I've had my best year ever in the middle of a pandemic. But the thing that you need to know when dealing with smaller square footage is you often are dealing with smaller businesses and startup businesses. So they're not going to have this big, huge pile of cash, let's follow that a little bit further. That's, if you have a space that looks like hell and you haven't, and it's not move-in ready. And alternatively, they have options that are more move-in ready. Even if they're paying a little bit higher cost per square foot, a lot of these, business owners are going to be attracted to that because, essentially it's like the interest-free loan. Like, hey, I might be paying a little bit higher cost per square foot, but I'm not having to pay for a, $40,000, $50,000 build out on the front end. So, I'm good with that. So I see that being pretty common, especially in the small square footage where they don't make it move-in ready and it sits there, forever. Where, quite honestly, if you made a spec suite or if you just fixed it up a little bit more, building it out a little bit more, you'd be able to get someone in there a lot faster.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And a lot of that sounds very similar to residential, I gotta say.
Money wise, pound foolish. I mean, that's really what it goes back to. And I think for both of our businesses, it's safe to say, even though they're very different, the whole supply demand thing really matters, because you know what, you can pound your chest and think that they're gonna adhere to the way you want to do business and your terms and your price and all this other stuff. You can do that all you want, but if they have all these other alternatives that are cheaper and look better, it's not going to work. The market will speak time and time again. The market does not lie. So, once again, that person's property where they were doing it on their own without the expertise and price too high, a year later, I'm like, okay, good luck, buddy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And sellers, landlords, just like residential sellers, consider your liability. Let's get the professionals involved that can help you navigate some of those pitfalls and landmines in those contracts.
And
so
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do is make sure that they don't over improve. I had a doctor that wanted me to lease his space, and he's like, oh, should I change out the light fixtures and the ceiling grid and all this other stuff? I'm like, no, you don't do that. All we have to do is paint and then get flooring down. It's going to look clean and move-in ready. And that was all we had to do.
I love it. Perfect. I love it so much. And I know that you mentioned a little bit about the market and things like that. So I'm curious, because we also, residential is a crazy market right now.
Yeah.
We also had a big year over the pandemic. How did you see that commercial landscape change over the course of the pandemic? And then how do you anticipate it looking in the coming year?
Okay. So just like everyone else, when this all went down, there was oh my gosh, what is going to happen to my business? Who is going to lease space or, purchase things in the middle of all of this with so much uncertainty? And what I found out very quickly is the answer is a lot of people. So what I loved seeing through this is that, COVID had taken a lot of lives, but it cannot kill the American entrepreneurial spirit, which, that's a great story in all of this. It just kind of gives me chills talking about it. But what we did was we changed the way business was being done, because we had to address that there's uncertainty now, that the government can shut your business down. It could limit your capacity. And obviously that's a huge thing. And so what I learned how to do, and I'm pretty sure every lease that I've done has had this in there. I was able to negotiate terms in there where if something like this happens, that rent deferment is allowable. You're including pandemic in what's called the force majeure area. And should you be shut down, you're working out a reasonable rent deferment plan with the landlord. And that's been, a game changer. But to tell you the truth, before this happened, almost anyone that has a lease right now, I will tell you, unless it's been really during COVID, if you look at your lease, there is probably nothing in there right now that protects you from something like this. And you might have found out the hard way when your doors were shut down and the landlord is still expecting rent. And so there's an opportunity moving forward, whether it be negotiating with your existing landlord or in your new space, to put that in there. And I highly suggest that's something that everyone does, because we know that it's very uncertain times. And I'll also say, just holistically, that office is a softer market, and we don't know what to expect with that because the whole work from home phenomena. So that one, and depending on the market, we could have a lot more availability, with spaces. the thing that I find interesting about that is before COVID happened, they were squeezing way too many people in spaces to begin with. This whole benching concept and wanting to look like Google, and we're tearing down walls and we're putting people right next to one another, but we're going to give them like a ping pong table or something and snacks, and they're going to be happy. The interesting thing that I'm wondering about is with the whole social distancing side of it for people that are in the office and when they're in the office, if we're going to have a little bit more of a buffer between people, whether it be larger workstations with the panels going up and more private offices, but maybe we're rotating how often we're in the office. We might not get as much square footage back on the market as we think we will because a number of things, social distancing and maybe a correction, but also because I think a lot of employers still kind of distrust having people work from home, especially if they're lower on the totem pole. And there'll probably be a place where managers still want to watch everything that you're doing to make sure that you're working hard enough.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have a quick thing for our viewership. If just based on what Mercedes just said, if you're working in an office where you've got a lot of people in there, or maybe you're the owner of a business that has an office space like that, let us know what you're seeing in your office. What is the setup looking like? Or have there been, obviously there have been adjustments since COVID, have there been adjustments since you've come back into the office? And maybe now that things are opening up and the mask mandates are loosening and things like that, what are you seeing? I'm really curious. So those of you watching it down the road, if you could put it in the comments, let us know.
And I will say, in terms of other areas that are really hot right now, again, with this changing climate, your industrial and flex market, especially in the DC metro area, is super, super hot. Everybody wants in. If you think about it, there's so many things that are now being delivered to us that before maybe we did go into a store, that now we're not doing that. So if I were an investor and had tons and tons of money, I would be trying to score as many of those properties as possible.
That's good.
Are you listening, people?
And feel free to reach out to me if you're in the Northern Virginia area and you want me to help you purchase these things. I'd be happy to help you.
Oh my gosh, 100%. This is such great information, Mercedes. And I think that, your just general knowledge, regardless of state, is so useful to anyone. If someone either in Virginia wanted to find you specifically as that state, or someone just maybe wanted to ask you a question or reach out or whatever the case is, would you maybe let us know kind of what are some of the best ways to reach you, whether it's social media, any of that stuff for us?
Yeah, sure. Probably the easiest would be to either call me or email me. My cell phone number is 703-994-9570. My email address is mtaylor, TAYLOR, @cbecommercial.com. And then also on Facebook, you'll see that there's a Mercedes Taylor commercial agent Facebook page that you can reach out to me that way as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll drop all that in the comments for everybody out there watching in the ether. And thank you guys so much for joining us today. And Mercedes, thank you. We really appreciate your time and all of the amazing information that you brought to the table today.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of get this information out, and hopefully it helps people.
Oh, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Mercedes. All right, you guys. Well, that's it for us here. So happy Friday from Business Salad Show. We love all of you. Appreciate you tuning in. And again, thanks again, Mercedes, for being on here. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.